You are listening to Dodging Divorce Disasters, a podcast where I interview divorce professionals that give you clear guidance, real talk, and smart strategies to help you make better decisions when it matters most. My name is Leigh Hawkins. I am a divorce realtor, expert, and your host. I have the privilege of working with these professionals daily, and there is a wealth of knowledge in each episode. Let's get started. I am so excited today because I have Leigh Williams. She is a family law attorney in the Charlotte area. I'll let her get a little bit more into that. Leigh, thank you so much for taking the time to come on here and talk to us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Of course. We have tried this a couple times
Yeah.
and between sickness and this, that, and the other. So I'm thrilled that that we finally got on here together. I am going to just let you kind of take over and kind of give your bio and the name of your firm and anything you want us to know about it.
Absolutely. So I am Leigh Williams. I'm the owner of Meridian Law Office. We started our office 2 years ago now in March, and we handle family law exclusively. That's all we do. That's all I've really done in my 12 years. I'm in my 12th year of practice, just family law straight up. We also handle adoptions and guardianship. So adult incompetency cases are a passion for us as well. Yeah, and so we practice in the counties. We are in Mecklenburg. We have a Charlotte office. We have an office in Concord as well. We practice in Union counties, Rowan County, Gastonia. That's it. Mecklenburg, Cabarrus County, Rowan County, Gastonia.
And you know what? I did not realize that you guys handle adoption because a lot of family law offices do not handle adoption. So that's good to know. I did not realize that.
Yeah, so we have experience with special proceedings. So that's it's a different section outside of the family court, where it's mainly the superior clerk handles those cases. But yeah, so step parent adoptions, it's more. You have your agency adoptions and your international adoptions. Those we do refer those out, but we handle step parent or third party adoptions in house.
Okay, that's good to know. I'm glad to know that. Okay, I always like to start with a fun fact so that people that can watch can kind of get an idea of who you are, maybe outside of doing family law. And yours was kind of twofold. One, you did mention that you've got three best friends that you guys continue every year to have a trip that you take, but you've kind of seen your through marriages, divorce, you kind of name it, everything that you can go through. You want to expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, yeah. So I think part of in my experience of divorce, part of the key to maintaining your sanity, especially as a female going through a separation and divorce, is to make sure that you have people around you. And I learned this with my three best friends that they saw you before the crazy, right? Before your separation started, before you just lose all of it, you still have that foundation of people who knew you when, right? Before. So they can see you through that time period. There's no judgment. They're not getting to know you again. You're not having to give them your whole back history. So 20 years now, it's been 20 years.
Wow.
We were all married very young, right out of college. We reconnected when we were going through a time of three of us were going through divorces and separations, and one had just lost her parent. So we were just all going through a traumatic time period. And we were in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina together, lived it up for that year, that summer. And we all transitioned out. Some of us got remarried, others of us started having children, lost more parents, births, but we've been there together through all of it, and it's been amazing. So now that we're in our later stages of our lives, we do make it a point to go on at least one annual trip. We've tried to go 2 times a year, getting it more frequent here lately, but yeah,
I love
they are the rock, truly.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. And you made such a good point in having someone that knew you pre-marriage, definitely pre-divorce, because they can kind of like, you know what? This is not who you are. I mean, I remember the spunk you used to have, and sometimes you just need that. I love that. I
Yeah,
love
and
that.
to
I love
remind you
that.
of who you were before, and to, put a personal you lose yourself, right,
You
in a
did.
relationship, and when you come back out of it, some of my best success stories. I love seeing clients come in their crazy, in that initial phase, right? Of I don't know what I'm doing, what's going on with my life. And then seeing them a year or two later, it's a complete transformation. It's
Yeah.
amazing. That's where I feel the most successful when I
Yeah.
help them get through that. But
Yeah.
yeah, to have your friends.
You are very one thing I love about you is you are very pro, and what I mean by that, you're very passionate. You're not just strictly business. As a family law attorney, you do get up close and personal with your clients but I always feel like you are a little bit more, what's the word? I don't know. I just feel like you're very passionate with your clients and that you take all of that in and appreciate what they're going through, respect what they're going through. It's not just another client that's going through a divorce. Everybody, has a special place. That's the way it looks from an outsider looking in. That's what it looks like.
No, it's very true. It's very true. My favorite clients are the ones who need a little more handholding, right? Through the emotional side of things. Um, I was a high school English teacher before I started practicing
I didn't know
in
that.
my first marriage, yep, and then I changed, I decided everything needed to change, I left teaching, went to law school, and so what I realized though as a teacher was that I found my best moments were when the students and I taught high school English, so the teenagers would come to me during break time and after school to talk about their family issues, and, a lot of their parents are going through separations and divorces, and I realized that, I found more passion in being able to help them on an emotional level
Mhm.
versus teaching. So that was when I went to law school, but law school teaches you what I see with a lot of attorneys, you're taught to just you focus on the law, right? And I was told so many times when I was teaching, just shut up, just be quiet and teach. Leave these kids, just teach them. You don't have to get involved with their lives. A kid would come and say they're homeless, and I'd go to the homeless department, and and they just say, just teach. That's your responsibility. But I take way more satisfaction in when a client leaves a consultation, especially, and they just even if they don't hire, we get through that hour and they have a clear direction on where they're going at the end of the consultation. When they look at me and as they walk out and they say, I feel so much better. I just feel so much
Mhm.
better that, now I know what to do. A weight's been lifted, that is the true satisfaction for me, for sure.
Ah, that is so good. You have a very big heart. Which kinda leads to the second thing, which makes me kinda sad for you, is that, you had mentioned, and I didn't know this, that you got to see your parents remarry, right? They divorced, and then they remarried, but then they divorced again.
They remarried each other. Yep,
Oh
yep.
my
They
god.
were, I was 12 when they divorced the first time, and then, my dad wasn't really in our lives, and then my mother so everything was his fault, growing up, and he just wasn't there to defend himself, right? And then my mother, when I was 18, announced to us that she had started dating him again, and that was just a huge thing, and then I went through my first divorce, and then, in my 20s, and I moved back in with my parents just to get through the year and study for law school and all that. And they remarried each other while I was there. I went to their wedding, their second wedding, and they were married almost 10 more years and then divorced again about 6 or 7 years ago. Yeah. So and then by that time I was a family law attorney, and that was a lot of, I cannot help the
Was it
conflict.
any easier the second time
Uh,
going through the divorce?
no. What I really, and maybe that's where I get my empathy from, right? For divorcing parents, and the children of divorced couples found, when one parent, it doesn't matter how old you are as a child, right? I was in my 30s when they divorced again. And to hear one parent talk bad about another parent, or, your dad's doing this, your mom's doing this, it doesn't matter how old you are, you're still their child, right? And there was a boundary that we had to set that I don't, I can't hear
Mm,
all of this again. But it was just as stressful. I think, knowing being an adult and having your own independent life is helpful, right? Versus children who are
right.
dependent on those parents for their security. But yeah, it's just as difficult. Yeah.
Goodness.
Well, I get the benefit of saying I went through it twice.
Oh, no, I know, and, that probably also too, though, helps you, like you said, with your law firm too.
It definitely it just sheds, and even going through it myself, I think, and having children. So I started practicing family law before I had my son, and just the level of knowledge and empathy that you can actually have for, a struggling mom, going through a separation and divorce, or even to see it from the dad's perspective. It's really interesting, and it just changes your whole perspective once you have children and once you've gone through a separation or divorce as well.
I
It's really, yeah.
And, because I do divorce real estate. That's my whole business is divorce real estate. And I have been through my own divorce, and when I am doing, like, the initial intakes and kind of going through the very first contact I have with my clients, it's almost like their whole demeanor changes when they realize that I have gone through a divorce myself. It's kinda like, "Okay." She kinda understands, what's going on. Because I tell them I wish I had a CDRE helping me sell my house, because when I went through my divorce, I wasn't in any of this yet. I wasn't even a realtor at that point. So, yeah, it does. It changes everything. Well, okay, let's kinda jump into the meats and potatoes of this whole podcast, which is for anybody that may be watching or listening, I want them to be able to walk away with some practical advice or tips because any of us that work in this genre and in the divorce field has seen clients make mistakes that if they had just done something differently, they could have avoided or dodged that divorce disaster. And I'm hoping whoever watches or listens to this can avoid it. What do you have for us? What's your story and advice?
I think the biggest thing when you asked me to consider that was the fact that people one of the biggest hurdles we find with our clients and complaints we get is, we've done all this, but they're still acting this way, right? The spouse is still he's still, doing this or she's still doing that. And we can't I think the hardest thing for people to understand is that we can't change personalities, right? Of your ex. And what we need to do is work with it, right? And not against it. So, what people also tend to do is hire attorneys that match their personalities, right? And usually, when you hire an attorney who doesn't match your personality, that's where you get that conflict, right? Where you don't trust their advice, you're not listening. When we have clients come in and they say, I want a Bulldog attorney, right? That is the biggest conversation that we have to hopefully help them understand. It's not about the Bulldog. It's not about, slash and burn, right? That is not going to help you at the end of the day. It may feel like that's what you want at the time, right? When it's first starting. But what you end up doing is you pay way more in legal fees, right? To take that slash and burn approach. A lot of times the attorneys, when you have the attorney that is the bulldog type that will do whatever at all costs, right? There creates a conflict between the other attorney, your spouse's attorney, right? And so then the attorneys get in the middle of what could have just been contentious at first, but we could have settled everything, right? At the end of the day. So I think recognizing that a bulldog attorney next to an attorney who is going to guide you through the process towards settlement if possible, right? But can also hold their own in a courtroom, right? If needed and
Right.
get tough when you need to. I always tell my clients, I am nice until I can't be any longer. We take the nice approach, right? To see what we can get by being nice. But if that doesn't work, we're here, right? For the rest of it. But when you hear, a lot of our friends, when you hear people talk about, I spent, $100,000 in legal fees and it, destroyed us. And people spend their assets fighting over, things that aren't worth. It's out of principle. You will spend a ton of money just out of principle and you'll spend all your assets on your attorneys. And that
Right.
can be avoided. It really can. But what it does take is most of the time it takes being that bigger person and recognizing the law is the law. That's the beautiful part about the law. I love the law for that. There are a lot of gray areas in family law. We call it the Wild West, right? In the courtroom. Anything goes in the courtroom of family law, but you do have the structure, the statutes, right? The law. If you take an attorney who knows the law and is very competent in the law that you trust and feel like I always like to say, I want somebody to leave my representation feeling like they had a friend, a true friend in their corner that guided them through this, right? Versus a bulldog attorney who's going to take your hundreds of thousands of dollars, slash and burn, cause a conflict, put on a great show in the courtroom. But at the
Mhm.
end of the day, the facts are the facts and the law is the law, right? So
Right.
you have a choice upfront to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to slash and burn, create that conflict, make it way more difficult on your children when there is conflict between the parents. We talk about co-parenting all day long, right?
Right.
Versus having somebody who's going to take the sensible approach, keep your legal fees down, follow the law, know what you're entitled to, and fight for that, but not spend the money and the time and cause the chaos in the courtroom to grandstand, right? Because all it does is
Right.
distract everybody from the case. Judges hate that. It makes, the client feel better. Oh, my attorney, yelled and pointed their finger a few times in the courtroom. I feel like I got something, but at the end of the day, you're going to get what you're going to get anyway, right? Regardless.
Right.
So I think crazy stories, really, my focus would be on, when you really start thinking about the assets and you start listing out all your marital assets. We've had clients who have listed toothbrushes. I had a case recently. We argued over fishing poles, $20 fishing poles, right? And suitcases. Those are the kinds of cases that you're spending, hundreds of dollars an hour on your attorney to fight over a $50 item, right? So I tell my clients, don't list anything that is lower than your attorney's hourly rate because it's not worth it to you
That's
financially,
good advice.
right? But yeah, that is really, I think that's the biggest one, is to really focus. Our clients have we have the law, we can guide you through the law. Our clients are dealing with the daily reality of
Right.
what we're telling them, right? So we can say, only communicate through your spouse through text message, right? When you have custody issues. But then your spouse keeps calling you, right? So what do I do with that? Well, that's the daily reality, right? But we need everything written and tracked, right? So we recognize that um, there's a lot more on the back end of what you deal with as a client, emotionally, day-to-day functioning, parenting and transitioning your children, right? Than what we can actually help you with too, right? To be completely transparent about that. So we also say, it's very helpful to remember a therapist is a lot cheaper than your
That's
attorney,
true.
right? So if you're using your attorney as the therapist, you're emailing them, 10 times a day with basic questions like, she just said this, she wants to pick up the kids at 7 o'clock, but the custody order says 6 p.m. What do I do? There are things there that you can manage for yourself that will help you save in legal fees, right? And we help coach our clients through that as well. If we see that their fees are going up from the amount of communication, okay, there might be a better person for you to talk to for these
Right.
fees, right?
Right.
Yeah, but I think the bigger one, another fun one is we recently had a judge say at a seminar, which was really eye opening, that a lot of our clients come in and say he's a narcissist. He's a narcissist. The word narcissist is rampant right now.
It
It's all
is.
over social media, and I love. And then you read it, and you're like, "What are they? Maybe." But apparently, like 1% of society, and I might be misquoting this, but they're actually diagnosed narcissists, right?
Right.
And then bipolar, the women tend to use men. Men are the narcissist, and the men are quick to say, "Oh, she's bipolar. Her emotion, she's up and down. I can't. I never know what I'm getting. I never know how she's going to react. She's bipolar, right?" So we actually had a judge say that, don't come in to the courtroom screaming they're narcissist or bipolar. That it is used so much now, it's ignored in the courtroom
Exactly.
unless you can prove there's an actual diagnosis, right? Medication, there's something or an event, right, that can point to the disorder. Um, that they're not listening to it now. So I think that's fun. When I see that on social media and I see I've done it. I go through, you go through the
Yes, it's
characteristics and you're like,
everywhere.
are they?
I
Yeah,
mean, we kinda spoke about Second Saturday, before we ever started recording because I'm a part of Second Saturday, which is a
that is
divorce
a great,
workshop. Yeah, it's a
it
divorce
really is.
workshop. The one that I'm a part of is just for women, and it's held up here in the Lake Norman area, and South Charlotte too. But that I can't tell you how many times the word narcissist comes up in that 1 3-hour meeting. I get it. And now I don't use the word narcissist as much, like, saying anybody is, as much as I say narcissistic traits,
Uh, they-
you know, because they can't have traits and not be, like, a full-blown narcissist, so
that's very true. That is very
yeah.
true. And I think that, seeing the traits, right, is the self-involvement. It's the, as the
Yeah,
manipulation. I think those are
yeah,
the biggest things. But when you're separating and divorcing from anybody, they're going to come off as self-involved, right? Because they're trying to get
exactly.
their life together, or,
That's exactly right.
manipulative because you don't trust them. There's a reason you're not with them anymore. So it's very difficult to trust what they're saying. Yeah, it's way overused, but and absolutely. And to add to that, Lori, we do have, I've been seeing a lot more lately, spouses do use the court system to perpetuate the cycle of abuse, right? So that's a very serious thing
What
that I
Tell me
think.
what you mean by that.
So the judges are getting a lot more training in North Carolina, in our county specifically, that I can speak to. That spouses, so if you come from a cycle of abuse, right? And I'm not talking just physical abuse, emotional abuse. If you felt abused, right?
Mhm.
And you take it to court. They're not settling. You're in litigation. You're fighting over every single thing. You're filing all these motions in court. What a spouse who was doing that during the marriage, right? The manipulation, the emotional abuse. They do tend to use the courts to continue that cycle of abuse, right? So let's say you leave them or they leave you, right? But they're not one party's not ready to let go. We see that a lot, right? So even if you think everything's done, you've settled, you're not done is the problem. So they will file another motion, right? They will
Oh,
drag you back into court over something simple, right? That could have been resolved outside of the courtroom, but that is the stress, anxiety, the financial strain, they are using the courts to continue that cycle, right?
yeah, if they can't get you one way, they're gonna use
Mhm.
the court system to get you.
And so we
I do
have,
hear
there's
that.
motions that we as attorneys can file when we notice a spouse is doing this, where they're just filing, bogus motions just to keep you in
Mhm.
court. But our judges are just now, I feel like, starting to pay attention to that, you can use the court system to
Yeah,
continue that abuse. And it's very, it's unfortunate that that
yeah.
is the way it is. But yeah.
And, I just heard, if this is along the same lines, and correct me if I'm wrong, I just heard 2nd Saturday was just last week from when we're filming this, and one of the women that attended said, "He is taking me to court all the time, just hoping that he is gonna wear me out financially so that I give up on this." So that's kinda what you're talking about, right? I mean, that was a true life person that said that.
Yeah, that's part of it. That is absolutely part of it. That's a huge strategy
Yeah,
for, usually it's the financially, the supporting spouse, right?
right.
Who knows that the other spouse does not have the resources, right? To get through the court case. And unfortunately that does happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now let me go back and ask you something to make sure I understand and that the listeners understand. When you were first talking about, like, choosing the correct attorney, like if somebody came in for a bulldog, so what you're saying is, because I see this on the mom Facebook groups all the time, which is one of the reasons I started this podcast. You're saying, because I see him say, "I need a bulldog," he's hired, blah, blah, blah. They're a bulldog, so I need a bulldog that's going to stand up to them, to be able to fight on the same level of what he is hiring. But what you're saying is you need to choose an attorney that is more on the level of what works for you, so that as long as I guess you choose the right one, because you've got to relate to your attorney. They can handle the bulldog. And I guess what you're saying too is you don't wanna hire a collaborative divorce attorney if they've hired a bulldog, because maybe they're not going to do like that. But if you get an attorney that does litigation, which might be part of your consultation, like they do have a bulldog. How are you gonna defend me, in that manner? But that's basically what you're saying, right? Is
Well, right. So if the other person hires a bulldog attorney and you come in and talk to us and you say, and it's a known, we have a few cases like this, right now, where we know that attorney will spend every dollar of that spouse's money, right, to slash and burn and make sure that you are run through the ringer. Part of what we do when you find an attorney, you need to find an attorney that you trust, right? Or you're never going to trust the outcome. You're never going to know that they did everything they could for you. So if I have a client come in and say, we need somebody that can compete with this Bulldog attorney and follow suit and do everything that, they are doing, you're going to run out of money, right? You're
Mhm.
going because you're going
Gotcha.
that level of fight, right? So the biggest thing to recognize is that you don't have to have a Bulldog attorney to go up against a Bulldog attorney, right? We go up against Bulldog attorneys all day long. It's not my posture to do that. I have attorneys that I refuse to talk with on the phone anymore because they're not productive, right? They're still on the other side of the case, and I'm still managing my client's case, and we're getting them through it, right? And we're following the law, and we're doing everything that we have to do to get them through this with the best outcome possible. But I'm not spending their legal fees to call and spend 30 minutes in a rant argument with their attorney because it's a waste of my client's legal fees, right?
Right,
Bulldog attorneys who call me at 7 o'clock at night, and I've had to block one recently, a rant about what my client's doing is unfair to their client. Well, that's not going to get us anywhere. You can have
right,
all your feelings and emotions about it. I'm not spending my client's money to talk to you and entertain, right? And because that's also, you're talking about reducing the client's legal fees, right? And keeping them in that spending cycle so that they run out of money. Well, we don't follow suit with that, right? If we're
right,
not if what we're doing isn't helping move your case forward, we're not entertaining the Bulldog attorney. They can show up in court and grandstand all they want, but we're not going to spend your legal fees to compete with the Bulldog attorney. And if that's what you expect to happen,
right.
we'll do it, but you're going to spend the money for it, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah, that
not
makes so
we
much
hate that
sense.
for you, right? That is not our
Right.
mission. That's not what we want to do.
Yeah,
Litigation is easier for attorneys. I think that's also something for important for clients to know. It's easier and we make more money doing it, right? We follow litigation is just straight, in court, follow the deadlines, follow the documents, engage in those, we call them nasty grams, the emails between attorneys, trashing the other client, writing the long letters and the motions. That's all, we make more money doing that. And if that's what you're looking for, you're going to be the friend at the party complaining that you spent $100,000 on your attorney and you don't know what you got, right? So that's where you want to be careful when you choose an attorney. You need to know that your attorney has your back, that they will do everything they can to get the best outcome for you. They're going to give you solid advice and they're not wasting your legal fees just by putting on a show, right? At the end of
right,
the day, but if you are the person who wants the show, then find an attorney who's going to give you that show. But just
right,
recognize you're going to spend way more money than you actually have to.
right.
Because at the end of the day, the law is the law, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, which is a perfect segue into your firm and what you guys have decided to do as far as, like, your fee structure and kinda your mission to help people, to help your clients. Explain that some in these last few minutes we have.
Yeah. So we recognized you doing this 12 years, working on retainers, and we asked clients, you're going to pay thousands up front. We really can't guarantee, what this is going to give you because we don't know how much communication is going to happen between us. We don't know what the other side's going to do. We don't know how much you're going to spend in the long run, right? So the traditional approach for most attorneys is to ask for thousands up front to get you what you can. And then, a month later, we spent that, we're asking for thousands more to continue our work or we're going to have to get out of the case, right? So we've recognized a huge pattern there and a huge disadvantage for our clients who need the structure of here's the total cost of your case, and it's a sticker shock when you hear the full amount, right?
Yeah,
When you get the estimate, but here is also how we can work with you through a flat fee. Here's the flat fee, but here's a structured payment plan, right? You're going to pay a percentage up front. And then here's a, flat fee program to get you through your entire case. When we started thinking about that format, we recognized how many more options that would open up for our clients, right?
right,
Some of my favorite clients are ones who pay as we go, right? So I'm not listed as their attorney of record because they're handling the real world situations themselves, right? But they're coming to us when they have questions. Okay, my spouse said this or this has just happened. What do I do now? And they just pay us as we go. We have a few different payment structures that we work with our clients in to meet them where they are with the goal of making sure that every person can at least get that guidance and get pointed in the right direction and get help through their legal process that they need, right? I know in some states, and I won't say the states because, it was a while ago since I saw
Mhm.
it, but when custody is involved, custody is a constitutional right, and that also got me thinking about the structure, right? Having a child is a constitutional parental right, right? As a parent. So in some states, they do have a structure where you are appointed a court appointed attorney when a custody matter is involved. North Carolina doesn't have that, unfortunately, right? But they recognize that legal representation in certain situations is a constitutional
Mm.
right, right? And so we have some clients who ask for pro bono assistance, right? Um, and I actually, one of my old mentors, I witnessed her telling a client she had come in and been asked for another retainer, another deposit, and she was crying and upset that she couldn't pay it. And the attorney told her, she said, having an attorney is not an entitlement. You're not entitled to an attorney. She used the word, she said, it's a luxury, right? And that oh my gosh, that opened up so much, right? And we attorneys tend to be on a high horse here. We tend to compare ourselves to doctors. Well, doctors get, paid this, this, and this. We have student loans. We have all this debt we've gone into to go through law school and, and build up our careers, right? And so what we're doing as attorneys is we're passing those fees on to our clients. And that's why attorneys' fees are so astronomical, right? But they don't have to be. That's what we've really tried to focus on and restructure our payment fees to reduce those costs for clients, give a more structured approach so they know exactly how to budget and how much they're going to spend at the end of the day. So that really was our goal, is to make sure that everybody, and that's our mission, right? Our what is it? Our logo, if you will, that
Yeah.
everyone deserves legal representation, no matter where you come from, your financial background, what your race is, how many children you have. There's, everybody needs something that we can help them with. So, and that's our mission.
That is great, and I've gotta say, of all the attorneys that I've worked with and the ones that I have either worked with on cases helping sell their clients' homes or even on this podcast, I truly think this is the first time I have heard this. So, I think that's great. It really is. I admire you for doing that. That once again just shows your heart. So, I'm glad to hear that. Well, for those that may be listening and will not see your contact information at the end, tell people the best way for them to get in touch with you.
Yeah. So our office phone number is, now I'm gonna lose it. 980-895-3179. When you call, you'll speak to Stephanie, is our client intake specialist. She'll walk you through the process, get you scheduled for a consultation. Our website is www.meridianlawoffice.com. You can even schedule a consultation right from that website. And then our email is info@meridianlawoffice.com.
Now spell Meridian,
Yep,
just
I know. It's Meridian,
okay,
like
perfect.
meridian on a globe. I was
Gotcha. There's
we were
different
careful.
ways of doing it. I know I used to try to find you, and I was like, "I cannot find
Oh,
it."
no.
So
Well,
so
we
that's
hear
great.
meridian. We get
Yeah,
meridian a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Well, I have enjoyed this so much, and you have given such wonderful information. I know that anybody that listens to this is going to be blessed because you've given a lot of good information out for people to learn and take to heart. So I wanna thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori, and thanks for having me.
Of course, it was so good to see you. Talk.
Thank you.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The information contained herein is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, please seek an attorney.